We are going to start off the show today. The news broke earlier this week. The Cleveland Indians are going to be getting rid of the nickname the Indians, much like the Washington Redskins have recently done. And to talk a little bit more about that and so many other things sports related, let's bring in longtime Detroit sports radio host and lifetime Cleveland Indians fan, Matt Dery, here with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Matt, were you devastated by the news, or did you anticipate it was going to be coming?
Hey, Ronnie, good to see you. No, I don't think I was, devastated or surprised. I was prepared for it. I think over the last couple of years, this is kind of where this has been going with team names. As a Tribe fan myself, if you can see back here, I got my Indians flag back here. I don't know, am I allowed to take that down or keep that up? I don't know. But it's weird because you're right. The Chief Wahoo kind of represents us as Indians fans, and it's always been this happy sort of symbol. I understood a few years ago when they took it away, and Major League Baseball and the Indians kind of decided, let's kind of shy away from it. Native Americans and certain others viewed it as disrespectful, and now we've kind of come full circle to actually changing the name. You mentioned before the word Redskins. Boy, what a slur. It really is. And I thought Washington spent way too many years defending it. Indians, maybe not as much a slur, but I do understand that this is where we are and kind of moving on from it.
I always wonder about what's going to happen to all the merchandise.
I know, right? That's what my wife said. I got a lot of gear, but I would think right now people would be scooping it up and buying it. And then of course, when the new name comes in, that people would be running to get that too. It's a 105-year tradition. It's part of me is very sad about it, but I do understand.
But with that too, what do you think they are going to rename it? Are they going to just drop a nickname like Washington did?
Well, first of all, Ronnie, if it's Cleveland baseball team, I'm gonna throw up. Come on, can we get a? They said next year for 2021, whenever baseball starts back up, that they will be the Indians for one more year. So that should give them plenty of time to rebrand and come up with it. The Spiders is a name that's popular because that was the original name of the team back in the 1800s before they changed to Indians. Me, myself, personally, you're having me on the show, I hate it. Please don't. Spiders, really? Come on now. I think Barons wouldn't be bad. In the mid-'70s, the city of Cleveland had a hockey team, and it was 3 years in the NHL, the Cleveland Barons. They had a cool logo. If I had to make a vote, I would go vote for Barons because there's a history there.
So, Tyler, do you want to jump in on this conversation? You're the sports fan here.
Yeah, definitely the approach has been different for the Cleveland Indians franchise and their rebranding, getting away from their current nickname, which has been their nickname since 1914, but has grown to be known as offensive to the general population, and that's why they're shying away from this and taking a much different approach to it altogether than the Washington football team had after years of backlash. Their owner, Dan Snyder, being very much in denial about changing that name or any desire to change it until the most recent events of 2020. And then the Cleveland Indians taking a different approach where they're much more welcoming to that. They're hearing the voices of the public, and then as they go into the rebranding, they are doing so in a gradual fashion to avoid that 1 year gap period where they have themselves be known as the Cleveland baseball team or something of some other sorts.
Right.
Speak to the difference in approach between what Cleveland is taking versus what the Washington football team is taking, and how that may help the fan base of Cleveland's baseball team transition into this new era. From your own personal angle as a lifelong Cleveland Indians fan, and from just a general sports fan's perspective, knowing what the Washington football team's fans are going through right now with their team being called the Washington football team.
No, Tyler, I think you bring up a lot of great points. Number one, I think the approach of ownership. A lot of Indians fans complain about Paul Dolan, the owner, for not spending enough money and being cheap and everything else. But with that being said, he's a first-class human being, and he listened to the fans. He listened to the Native American individuals that for years were protesting outside the stadium, whether it was opening day, whether it was during the World Series 5 years ago. And he's listening to them. And they sat down and they said, all right, we're going to make the consideration of changing. Then they sat down with local Native American leaders, national leaders, And they made the determination that this was the right thing to do. Snyder and the Redskins folks treated this like a joke for years. People were saying it's a slur, your logo is a slur, and they just kept bumping it off until major sponsors, earlier this year said, we're pulling the plug. Oh, so now it's because of the money. So I think the Indians' approach has been definitely better. Now let's see where they go with it. Now let's see what they come up with in terms of a name and how they rebrand. But I think they've handled it the right way. Now, there's plenty of people, including friends of mine, that say, oh my gosh, it's cancel culture and this is too over the top and Indians isn't a slur. What's next? Will the Kansas City Chiefs be forced to change their name? The Atlanta Braves? We'll see. But Chippewas, because it's a tribe in central Michigan, that's been okayed. Seminoles at Florida State has been okayed by the Seminole Nation. So it's interesting.
Yeah, in a lot of those cases, you do bring up a good point that has been a conversation between those Native American tribes and those brands before they continued on with those brand names. For a while there, it was looking like the Central Michigan Chippewas may have to change their name. The Florida State Seminoles may have to change their name. But those conversations were had, those agreements were made, and it was cleared by both parties involved in order to be able to continue on with that branding. And then going back to the current rebrand with the Cleveland Indians franchise, there's a year in between now and when they would be beginning their a year plus between now and when they would be beginning their first season under their new nickname. Do you imagine that this is going to be, would you presume that with the current ownership of this franchise, that this is going to be more of an internal rebrand, or do you believe that they will heavily engage the Cleveland baseball team's fan base in the city of Cleveland, like we see when we have an expansion team come into a new league in many cases in recent years and in the past?
I don't know. That's a good question, Tyler. I'm not sure. Like I said, the Dolans need to reach out to the fans a little bit better, and I think that would certainly be this would be an opportunity to do that. The last time they changed and went to Indians, it was a contest in the old Cleveland Plain Dealer newspaper. So I don't know if they're going to go back to that again now. And we all know, and Ronnie knows this, social media, it can get a little crazy. So, I think they'll reach out. I do believe they should, put it, not necessarily put it to a vote of the fans, but I definitely think that things will leak out. Okay. There's already Cleveland Spiders logos. There's already things that have already started leaking out. Like I said, I'm not a fan of that. I would rather be Barons than Spiders, but we'll see where they go. We'll see where they go with it.
Matt Dery with us, longtime Detroit sports radio host. You know him from his time in 13 years at WDFN 1130 AM, as well as on Detroit Sports 105.1 from 2013 to 2016, and more recently on his Detroit Pistons Wired podcast and Locked On Lions daily podcast. So, Matt, bringing it back to local sports here in Detroit, it's not a great time to be a Detroit sports fan. None of the local professional teams, especially, and even to some extent on the college side, especially on the gridiron, it's been a tough several years here in the Detroit area, and that's certainly reflected in your old neck of the woods and Detroit sports radio. But there are a lot of things to be positive about in Detroit sports also, particularly with a lot of the young prospects that we have on our teams. And let's start off with the Detroit Pistons. Things have been looking a little bit brighter as we've gone into this preseason. Certainly this isn't going to be a team that's going to contend for a playoff spot. Definitely not going to be a contender even in a weaker Eastern Conference. But one of the many bright spots they have on their team are those young prospects that they have, like Sekou Doumbouya, who's currently starting off with a great preseason, currently averaging about 12 points per game, just under a block, 4 rebounds. He's had a couple of electric games against the New York Knicks and the Washington Wizards. And then you have other young guys with a lot of promise, like Killian Hayes, who are learning from veteran players like Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose. Are things looking up for the Detroit Pistons, even though they're still very early on in this rebuild?
Yeah, I think so. I really like what Troy Weaver, the general manager, has done. He has come in and immediately cleaned house. 80% of the roster turnover from a year ago. Some surprising moves, both at, when free agency started, and also the draft. And I like that. he's injected a little bit of energy in that building. A lot of young players. You mentioned Sekou, you mentioned Hayes. Give them an opportunity. Let them play. They're going to have their bumps in the road this year. They're going to lose some games. They're only playing 72 as opposed to 82, but that's okay. If you're back in the lottery next year, so what? That organization, and I've worked for them for a long time, they refused to hit the reset button for many years, going back to Joe Dumars, when some, including Mike Valeni, who I worked with at the Ticket for years, was always begging for a rebuild. Now they have it, but they're sort of rebuilding, but with some pieces already in place before Troy got there. So I am excited about what they're doing. I think it's positive. You mentioned before about Detroit sports, and it's been rough. It's been rough. The Tigers, I don't really know where they're going. I know they're younger, but I don't see them bypassing any of the 4 other teams in their division anytime soon. The Lions are the Lions, although now them starting over is a good thing, certainly. And I think a new GM and coach should revitalize some things. And I love the Chris Spielman move. And the Red Wings, again, you're right, in a weird spot too. But I think Steve Yzerman will get it done. I just think it's going to take longer.
Yeah, the Pistons are looking really nice, and they're taking risks too, both at the front office level, bringing in some young guys with promise like a Josh Jackson, who just had a great game last night against the Washington Wizards, and taking risks on some guys that are veterans of the league but still relatively young, like a Jeremy Grant. Things are definitely looking up. It's going to be several years for the Detroit Pistons. On the other side, the Detroit Lions fired their head coach Matt Patricia, finally, in the middle of the season. Interim coach Darrell Bevel takes over. They also let go of Bob Quinn, the general manager, and now they're in a search for both the GM and the coach. It looks like currently they're looking for the GM first, a move that I certainly agree with. A lot of good candidates already out there, especially because they made this decision so early on. They've talked to guys like Louis Riddick from ESPN. Most recently, they interviewed Scott Pioli, the ex-GM of the Kansas City and a longtime executive scout for the New England Patriots. Right. In terms of the candidates that are currently out there on the GM side, who do you believe right now are some of those top-level candidates that the Lions should really be looking at among the guys that they have talked to already and maybe some that they haven't?
Well, I talk about it every day on Locked On Lions on my podcast. I think they're doing this right. Yes, I said it. The Detroit Lions are actually doing something right. So that's a positive. I think at the very top, Sheila Ford Hamp and Rod Wood don't know anything about football. Plain and simple. But what I like is that this week they brought Chris Spielman in to help them, to sort of guide the ship a little bit here when it comes to the interviews. I've been a Louis Riddick fan going back to my radio days in 2015. I had him on my show a lot, and I wanted the Lions to hire him before they hired Bob Quinn. So I've been on the Riddick bandwagon for 5 years. I like him a lot. I think he's sharp. He has experience in front offices. Do I think that's who they're going to hire? I don't. I think they're going to probably go with somebody with experience. Rick Smith would be a great candidate with formerly with the Texans. Only reason he left Houston was his wife was very ill, ended up passing away, and he stepped away from his position. He drafted Deshaun Watson. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. I think he would be a breath of fresh air. Look for a name like Ed Dodds. He's the assistant GM with the Colts. Their front office is structured beautifully. They can't interview him until after the season, but that would be another name that I would be very interested in seeing the Lions kicking the tires on, that's for sure.
Yeah, his draft classes in Houston were fantastic, bringing in guys like Deshaun Watson, building that team that we're seeing now consistently up until recent years be a very solid team, very consistent team that was right on the cusp of getting over the hump and being a Super Bowl contender. That would be a great pick. I also like the interview with Scott Pioli, although I'd rather see the Lions shy away from the Patriot way for a while. On the head coaching side, who are some of those candidates that you're looking at as this would fit this team as we currently have it right now, but also be able to mold into that next level, that next era of Lions football and maybe even turn things around?
I really think the leader in the clubhouse is Robert Saleh from Dearborn and right here in Detroit, the 49ers defensive coordinator. I think he's dying for this job. I think he wants this job. He'd love to come home. He has family here. He has a big family out in San Francisco. And he's also very competent and a very good candidate. The 49ers defenses over the last years have been ferocious. This year they've lost a ton of guys, yet they still battle and compete. Kind of ironic, his name came up for the Lions job, and the next game he was on national TV and got smoked by the Rams, and it was kind of an ugly night, which is sort of Lion-esque. Remember, Matt Patricia was getting the Lions job, and then in the Super Bowl, his defense couldn't stop West Bloomfield High School. Actually, West Bloomfield's pretty good. Clarkston, name them. Okay, couldn't stop a high school team. And then Patricia, of course, failed miserably here. He was an embarrassment. So I think Saleh would be the number one guy. I believe he'll get an interview for sure. Offensively, watch for this, Tyler and Ronnie. I think if Doug Peterson gets fired in Philly, this is a Super Bowl winning coach. The Lions will talk to him. And there's a chance that happens. That I wouldn't rule out as far as another name for head coach. Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator with the Bills, should get an interview. That offense is spectacular and very well run and very creative. So that's another name I think that would be out there.
We are joined by Matt Dery, longtime Detroit sports radio host and Cleveland radio host here on 89.3 Lakes FM on Civic Center TV and 88.1 The Biff, as well as Birmingham Area Municipal Access on the Oakland County Megacast. You can hear Matt on his podcasts, the Detroit Pistons Wired podcast and Locked On Lions Daily podcast, as well as a fill-in host on 92.3 The Fan FM in Cleveland. Matt, just a few more minutes with you before we let you go. On top of your sports gig, you're also in another gig locally with Financial Architects, where you started in 2019 as their communication and business development director. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you are doing there and how maybe that has some parallels to your previous work in the local area?
No, I appreciate it. It's been a bit of a whirlwind for me, like we talked about in 2016 when I was let go by the then failing and now failed Detroit Sports 105.1. We've all been there. I really sort of did a pivot and decided to kind of get out of that business. There really was nothing for me here. Like I said, I fill in Cleveland, so I still have some radio that I can do. But I worked 3 years at U of D High teaching, and loved it. Absolutely love U of D Jesuit. But at Financial Architects, my wife and I have been clients since 2010, 2011. And it's a firm that is, holistic and macroeconomic. And we take a look at everybody's whole picture and decide if it's a fit or not. And it's great people. And you want to be around an amazing culture and working alongside people that you enjoy being around, and that it's a healthy environment. And it was a no-brainer when they came to me and said, hey, listen, we need help with marketing and branding, and we want to take next steps. And they had some new ownership there. And that turned into me absolutely taking the job. And I absolutely love it. It's a great place. Introduced a lot of people that I know to our advisors to hopefully help them out. And there are some parallels with radio a little bit. They said to me, we want to do a podcast. Can we do it? And I said, yeah. And they're like, well, how long would that take? And I said, we can do it today. I said, I got equipment in my basement. I got my microphone right here. I got my stuff here. So we developed that, and we do that. It's called the Empowering Futures Podcast Network, and doing videos and stuff like you guys are doing here, webinar shows. So I'm kind of moving the brand forward. I had like the sports background, but still the broadcasting, and I brought it to FAI, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, Matt, we appreciate having you on. Anything else that you would like to say, or anything else you'd like to discuss before we let you go today?
Well, I mean, listen, if you're going to have me on, we haven't even brought up Ronnie's sweater today. Like, Ronnie Dahl's a local legend. We all know that. And so the sweater, see David, I can see David in Q. He's even smiling like this. That's top-notch stuff. And the red underneath. Come on, Ronnie. Give yourself some credit here.
But you even missed it. See, Tyler got lucky because I had one for him. I just didn't get it to him in time. It has cats and it lights up.
Oh, come on.
It's a glorious sweater.
See, that's big time. That's big time. I feel underdressed and not wearing, not participating. But
same here.
Next time you have me on, Lawrence, give me a heads up and I'll wear the sweater. But awesome to see you guys, and I appreciate you having me on.
Well, happy holidays to you and your family.
You too, Ronnie. Thanks so much. Thanks, Tyler.